Greetings and welcome to StudyIQ. My name is Prashant Dhawan, and in this video we are going to talk about the recently concluded G20 2017 summit that was held in Hamburg, a city in Germany. So in this video we are going to discuss a lot of things, as you can see. First of all, we will talk about the origin of G20, where it all began. And while we are at it, we will also discuss G7, G8, G4. That will do all of us some good. And then we will discuss the 2017 G20 summit. What was India's role, India's objectives? We will analyze that. Finally, there were huge protests in Germany against G20. What was all that about? I will explain that as well. Finally, we will also discuss geopolitics. I think you guys will find this quite interesting. StudyIQ's pendrive and tablet courses are available for all these exams that you see on your screen: SSC, CGL, CHSL, Bank PO, Clerk. Other than that, recently we have also launched our UPSC pendrive and tablet courses. To order these courses, you can just call these numbers over here or visit our website studyIQ.com. The genesis of G20, how G20 came into existence. Now, if we are to understand this, we need to understand how G7 and G8 came into existence. This is quite important. Now, first of all, G7 and G8 are the same groups. Have absolutely no doubt about that. There is just one minute difference. I will tell you about this in a few minutes. Now, you must have read about G7 and G8 in various magazines and newspapers. So over here, we will understand how this group, basically this is one group, how this group came into existence. You see, in 1975, the world was going through an oil crisis. It was an economic crisis. And in order to tackle this crisis, 6 countries, Italy, Japan, France, Germany, UK and USA, these 6 countries formed a group called G6. Now, just 1 year later in 1976, Canada joined this group. So G6 ended up becoming G7 because now there were 7 countries in this group. Now, this is how G7 came into existence. Now, some of you might be asking how G7 became G8. How did that happen? Well, after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, it was just a matter of time before the Russian Federation also joined this group, this elite group. So in 1997, Russia was officially invited to G7 countries and it joined this group in 1998. So G7 became G8 because now after Russia was added, there were 8 countries in the group. So automatically G7 became G8. Now G8 stayed in existence for a little over a decade. But in 2014, G8 became G7 again. Now, how did this happen? Well, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine, and this angered all the other nations of that group. So, the 7 nations of G8, the other 7 nations except Russia, they decided to throw out Russia from this group. So, after Russia was thrown out, G8 became G7 again. So, this is the whole story. Now let me tell you about the annexation of Crimea, because we will talk about the annexation of Crimea quite a few times in this video. What you see in front of your eyes right now here is the map of Europe. The red part, the red highlighted part is Ukraine and the yellow part is Russia. I have also highlighted Crimea for you. This is Crimea. I'm sure most of you can see it. This map is a little better. I think all of you can see it over here. This is Crimea. So Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. The capital of Ukraine is Kiev, of course. So Crimea was a very important part of Ukraine, and what Russia did was it sent its army in Crimea and it decided to hold a referendum in Crimea. And according to Russia, most of the people in that region, they wanted to join the Russian Federation, and so Russia just annexed this part. Now it sounds quite odd. Now this is one of the reasons why the G8 countries decided to throw out Russia. And just imagine, had something like this happened to Russia. Over here you can see St. Petersburg. It is a very famous city of Russia. Just imagine if one day US decides to hold a referendum over here, ask the people, do you want to join USA? And if they say yes, then yes, St. Petersburg suddenly now becomes a part of USA. So what Russia did was quite odd, and I personally think it sort of deserved the sort of treatment it got by getting thrown out of the G8 countries. So anyway, this happened. Now the political repercussions of this move by Russia were quite severe, because first of all, Russia was ousted from G8, but that didn't really affect Russia all that much. I will tell you about that. But other than that, various sanctions were imposed by Western Europe and USA on Russia, so that Russia feels the repercussions of committing such an atrocious act. But things were about to get much worse for Russia, because Russia had the capacity to handle all the sanctions and still stay strong. But at the same time, oil prices plummeted. So oil prices plummeted from around $120 per barrel to around $50 per barrel, and this also caused the Russian currency ruble to crumble. You see, the exchange ratio before 2014, before the oil prices crashed and the sanctions were imposed on Russia, was around, suppose if you have 2 Indian rupees, that would just give you around 1 ruble. That was the exchange rate. But after 2014, the exchange rate was 1 rupee became equivalent to 1 ruble. So this is how much the ruble fell. And as I told you, the repercussions were quite severe. G7 and G8 pretty much did what they were intended to do for a very long time. But later on in the beginning of 1990s, the world felt that there needs to be a bigger group of countries. A group that has developed and developing countries working together to solve world's major economic problems. So G20 was founded in 1999. Alright, so in 1998, Russian Federation joined the G7 and it became G8, and 1 year later G20 was born. Because of major developing nations like China and India, these countries, like, well, not just China and India, also Indonesia and other countries, developing countries, they needed to be involved in an international forum so that they can also voice their opinions. So in 1999, G20 was born, and its aim was to discuss policy issues pertaining to the promotion of international financial stability. At that time, geopolitics was not discussed over there, and neither was the intention of doing so. So the members of the G20 nations are in front of you: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Russia. Now, Russia, when Russia annexed Crimea, it knew that it would be thrown out of the G8 countries. And Russia wasn't all that concerned about being thrown out of G8, because Russian Federation knew that it was part of G20, and G20 was now more influential than G7 at that time, because G20 had Russia, it had India, it had China. So all these major economies were part of G20. So of course G20 became a much more important group. So although the oil prices, when they plummeted, and since Russia is an exporter of oil, that affected the Russian economy along with the sanctions. But the exclusion from G8 wasn't exactly a huge blow to the Russian Federation. So other than Russia, Saudi Arabia is a member, South Africa is a member, South Korea, Turkey, UK, US and the European Union. So 19 countries plus the European Union equals to G20. Alright, so this is G20. Now let me just show you a map. So this map will help you to understand what exactly are G20 countries all about. So you can see the entire North America is part of the G20, Canada, US, Mexico. It makes it easy to memorize, I think. And if you look at South America, then only 2 countries from South America are members of G20. Those 2 countries are Brazil and Argentina. In Africa, you can see South Africa is a member. And over here in the Oceania region, Australia. And if we go back to Asia again, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, India, People's Republic of China. Then Russia is also a member, Turkey is a member, Saudi Arabia is a member, and over here you can see the European countries plus the European Union. All of them form the G20 together. Now we have some notes about G20 over here. As I told you, G20 was founded in 1999. At that time, prime ministers and presidents of various countries did not attend the G20 summit. So this started in 2008. This was the first time when heads of states and leaders around the world, they attended the G20 summit. Why? Because of the global economic crisis. So the purpose of G20 is to bring together systematically important industrialized and developing countries to discuss key issues in the global economy. Now, of course, this is the main purpose, but geopolitics is also discussed over here. And the chairperson of G20 is Argentina's Mauricio Macri. Now let's talk about the 2017 G20 summit. Where was it held? This is quite important. This question can be asked in various comparative examinations. So this was held in a city in North Germany, Hamburg. This is the name of the city. Now, there were massive protests against G20 summit in Hamburg. Now, why did this happen? And let me tell you, those protests were so ugly. The situation turned so ugly that police had to be brought in and a lot of policemen were injured. Hundreds of people were taken into custody and overall it was just a very bad sight. Now, why did this happen? First of all, you need to know that wherever a G20 summit is held, there are some protests. Why? Because people from the left wing ideology, they believe that G20 summit is of no use. All the policies of G20 countries are pro-capitalist. They are just working for the multi-billionaires of the world, the Bill Gates, the Warren Buffetts of the world, and they are just trying to make sure that their objectives are met rather than what is good for the planet. One of its prime examples is climate change. Now, the people who belong to the left-wing ideology, they are very concerned about climate change. They are very concerned about the way the global average temperature is rising, and they believe that if something is not done soon, the earth will face a lot of catastrophe. And they also believe that the G20 countries are doing nothing about it. Now, as you probably know, Paris Climate Agreement has pretty much failed because US pulled out of it. Now, again, they don't really see this as a failure of the US government or a decision of one president. They see it as a collective failure of G20, and they hold G20 responsible for that. Other than that, there are also issues of refugees and the right-wing groups rising all over the world. So all this has ignited a lot of aggression in the left-wing groups, and we saw that in Hamburg. Thousands of people came to protest against G20. And look, there are a lot of left-wing, far-left organizations, and one of the prominent ones are Antifa. I suggest you Google this a little bit. It is a far-left organization that fights against fascism. So what is Antifa against? Now suppose if a German citizen believes in the fascist ideology, so most probably he will be a racist. He will believe that the Caucasian race, the white race, is actually superior to that of African race or the Asian race. So he will be a racist. Other than that, we can also expect him to be a xenophobe. He will have strong opinions on a certain religion, primarily Islam. He will have a lot of reservations about refugees coming in Germany. According to Antifa, this is the definition of fascism. And they are fighting against fascism. They are fighting against people who think climate change is a hoax and nothing is going to happen to Earth, and they just want to keep on polluting irresponsibly. So Antifa is against that as well. Now, it might sound good, but the way they conduct themselves is quite wrong. The way Antifa conducts itself is quite wrong. Antifa has repeatedly opted to use violence as a means to be heard in the international arena, which is quite bad. So this is pretty much all you need to know about that. And the theme for this year's G20 summit was shaping an interconnected world. Make sure you remember that from examination point of view. Other than that, PM Modi, our Prime Minister, met a lot of leaders from around the world on the sidelines. Now, on the sidelines means that while all the leaders are together in the G20 summit, some leaders decide to have one-on-one bilateral meetings to discuss some other issues. They don't really sign any pact or any agreement. G20 summit basically works as a catalyst that leads towards agreements and mutual understandings between nations. Now over here we have the list of all the bilateral meetings on the sideline of G20 summit. First of all, let's talk about the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and PM Shinzo Abe. Not a lot was discussed in this meeting. Both the leaders pretty much talked about the Malabar naval exercise that will begin from July 10th in the Bay of Bengal. The Malabar naval exercise will involve US, Japan and India, and is of great concern to China. China is quite concerned about that. And then he also met, PM Modi also met Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. After that, he also met South Korea's President Moon Jae-in. Now this was quite an important meeting because India wants South Korea to participate in Make in India, Digital India initiatives, and South Korea seems to be quite enthusiastic about it. So other than that, India and South Korea's Bilateral relations have been flourishing for quite some time. A lot of South Korean countries have invested a huge amount of money in India, like Hyundai and Samsung. Although a lot of steel manufacturers from South Korea wanted to invest in India, that didn't really go all that well. But perhaps in the future, the trade between the two countries will also increase. Then PM Modi met with the Prime Minister of Italy, Paolo Gentiloni. He talked about World Food India. It is a food processing exhibition that will be held in India in November. So PM Modi wants the Prime Minister of Italy to attend it, and the Prime Minister of Italy seemed quite enthusiastic about it, and it seems that he will attend the exhibition. Other than that, PM Modi also met Prime Minister of Norway, Erna Solberg. Norway is a Scandinavian country. The capital of Norway is Oslo. And Prime Minister Modi proposed that Norway should invest its pension funds in India. Look, a lot of people in Norway who are around the age of 30 to 40 now, they are saving money for their old age pension. And the government wants to invest that pension fund somewhere so that it can grow and they can actually give something back to their citizens after 2 or 3 decades. So Modi ji has actually advised Erna Solberg that Norway can invest the funds in India, and India will give good returns for that. So over here, Modi ji is pretty much attracting more investments for India. And then he also met the Argentinian president, and he also met Theresa May, the Prime Minister of UK. Now, before talking about the 2017 G20 summit, let me just tell you about G4 nations. We have talked about G7, G8, G20. Now let's just discuss G4 as well. Look, the G4 nations comprise of 4 countries, Brazil, Germany, India and Japan. Now, in order to understand G4 nations, you must understand P5. P5 means permanent 5. As you know, United Nations Security Council has 5 permanent members: China, US, France, UK and Russia. Now, these 4 countries want an expansion of this Security Council. They want a seat in the Security Council, and they have been trying to do so for a very long time. So after years of not being able to succeed in this, these countries decided to form a group, and they will ask for a united seat for all these countries, and these 4 countries can actually share that seat. Now they are ready to do even that, but a lot of countries are opposing this idea as well. Now, for example, Pakistan is opposing India's bid. Of course, Pakistan will do that. I don't really think you need any explanation to understand that. And Japan's bid is heavily opposed by China and South Korea, because they still hold Japan responsible for the atrocities inflicted on the Chinese and Korean people by the Japanese army in World War II. And in Latin America, Argentina and Mexico are opposing a seat for Brazil. So the countries that oppose these countries over here, the G4 nations, they have a group of their own. It is called the Coffee Club, and it is an informal group, and their main objective is to just stop these 4 countries from attaining a seat in the United Nations Security Council. Now, coming back to the 2017 G20 summit, the Prime Minister of Norway also invited India to participate in Oceans Conference on the sidelines of the next UN General Assembly. Alright, so Norway's Prime Minister, we saw her, Solberg, she invited PM Modi to participate in Oceans Conference. And in a gesture symbolizing cooperation of attainment of sustainable development goals, Prime Minister Solberg presented to Prime Minister Modi at the end of the meeting a football with sustainable development goals inscribed on it. Other than that, in a joint statement, G20 leaders vote to take steps to choke financing to terror groups, and to also take steps to prevent the internet from being used to spread propaganda. Now, we are talking about hate propaganda against Western nations and its allies, of course. Now, we need to understand that these steps that will be taken to prevent the internet from being used to spread propaganda, it will eventually lead to mass surveillance of people. So what the governments will do is they will actually spy on people to make sure that they aren't getting involved in some illegal activity, or they aren't being influenced by a propaganda. So in the end, this will lead to another problem of encroachment of a person's privacy. So these problems are hard to solve, because at times when you solve one problem, you end up getting tangled in another one. So I think for the time being, it is the right step to stop terrorism, because people are dying because of terrorist attacks all over the world. But in the long run, the countries must do something to make sure that people's privacy is not encroached. Next point is the United States and Russia reached a Syrian ceasefire agreement after talks between Trump and Putin in Hamburg. Now, Trump has been known to be a pro-Russian US president after a very long time. Obama was quite anti-Russian and he actually imposed all the sanctions on Russia when Russia annexed Crimea. Now, Russians actually expect Trump to remove all those sanctions so that their economy can rise again. Women's economic empowerment. The World Bank Group and White House represented by first daughter Ivanka Trump. Now, this is quite unique. This has not been seen in American politics for a very long time now. Perhaps not in the history of American politics, where a sitting president is promoting his own family and has actually deputed his family in high rank positions in White House. Now, this usually leads to mass criticism, but right now Donald Trump is in such position that his supporters will literally support him even if he shoots someone on the street. So Ivanka Trump being a representative of White House is quite odd, unique, and she has no prior experience in politics. She is just there because she is a daughter of the president. So you can say that Donald Trump is actually planting the seeds of dynasty rule in American politics, where after Donald Trump, his daughter can actually try to become the president, or perhaps his sons can try to become presidents. So for the time being, the World Bank Group and White House, represented by the first daughter Ivanka Trump, confirmed that they would soon roll out a new fund that aims to help female entrepreneurs access capital, financing, and managerial support in the developing world. So in the developing world countries like India, Brazil, Pakistan, Indonesia, this fund will be used to promote women entrepreneurs. Now, World Bank Group President Jim Kong Kim said Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative Fund has so far raised $325 million from various governments, and he hoped to leverage that into multi-billion-dollar investment framework. All right. Now, US has pledged 50 million in this fund, and Donald Trump was quite excited about it. He said that if one woman is empowered, then a family is empowered. So basically, this is a pretty good initiative. I don't really find anything that one can criticize about this, but one can genuinely criticize this move by Donald Trump to promote his daughter in an international platform like G20. Other than that, G20 leaders have also pledged to commit to keep markets open. So they will promote an open market economy, then open market economy structure in every country, and they will also fight against protectionism. What is protectionism? Now, suppose a country like China, it has a weak domestic steel manufacturing industry and it wants to protect it. Now, right now, the steel manufacturing companies in China, they can't really offer steel to the domestic companies, the other domestic companies that want to buy steel in China at comparative prices. But the American steel manufacturing companies have been there for a very long time. They are quite strong and they know how to produce good quality steel for comparative prices. So they will try to export their steel. Now, if China wants to protect its domestic industry, then it will blockade this move by the US by imposing heavy import tariff on the US steel manufacturers. So this will stop them from actually selling steel in China. Now, G20 leaders have actually spoken against this sort of policy. Other than that, unfair trade practices. Now, a lot of things come under this unfair trade practices. One of the most prominent ones, one of the most well-known ones is China's currency manipulation. China's currency is Chinese renminbi, and they manipulate their currency a lot to actually gain more profit from their exports. Other than that, all G20 members had backed India on the issue of quota reforms of IMF and called for early reforms. Now, IMF has voting system where every country has a share of its vote. So India wants its quota share to increase from 2.44% to 2.75%, and so does China. But we just have to be concerned about. So far, no development has been made on this, but the way things are going, I think we will see some progress done on this issue soon. And this is the end of the video. If you want me to make a video on some other topic, then do mention it in the comment box below. Make sure to like the video as well. Also share it. And good luck with your studies. Keep studying hard. God bless you all.